So for today's video, we're going to go through the correct hip height starting position in the deadlift. So why the hip height starting position is important, because if it's not set right, it would affect the mechanics of the deadlift significantly, which may reduce the amount of load you can potentially be lifting. There's a few deadlift errors that can be fixed by just simply starting with the hips in the right hip height, which can make your deadlift feel much easier and stronger. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over some real life examples so you can identify when you have set your hips in the wrong position, and plus give some examples to show when you have the hips in the right position. So this is going to be helpful if you're filming your own lifts from the side, so you could work out if your hips are too high, too low, or if you've got them in the right position. So to start off, I've got to show 3 images. First one, this is the correct position that we want to be in. So generally, what's going to make a good hip starting position, this is both relative for a sumo and conventional deadlift. This is a sumo position that I'm doing, but conventional is going to look very similar, and the rules still apply. So when we're looking directly from the side, generally, we want to have this edge of the barbell in line with around our shoulder blades. We do not want it in line with the shoulder. We want it in line with the shoulder blade. So that is one thing I'm looking at. 2, another thing that's going to make a good hip height is that we have this nice V between my torso and my thigh. So this is going to be the right hip starting position, because if I was going to stand from here, you will see my hips and knees open at the same time, which I will demonstrate later in this video. If the hips are too high, now if you're looking at the side of the barbell, it is going to be behind the shoulder blades. The thigh angle will be more diagonal or closer to vertical, and you will see the torso will be more horizontal, or it can even look parallel relative to the floor. So in this position, my knees are a little bit too straight. So if I'm going to lift this bar off the floor, it's going to look more like a stiff-legged deadlift. Then if your hips are too low, looking from the side view of the bar is generally going to be in front of the shoulder blades. Now the thigh is more horizontal or parallel looking to the floor, and the torso is more upright and more vertical relative to the floor. Now this is a real life example when the hips are starting too low. I mean, Nick is not getting good tension at the bottom either, but that is a problem with the hips starting too low. But you can see that already in this position, if we're going back to the pictures I was just showing before, the first thing that we can see, if I can pause it in the right position, already you can see the thigh is closer to horizontal to the floor. This is more upright in his torso, and you're going to see when he lifts that the hips are going to shoot up. Alright, this is a bit of an extreme example, but you see the hips shoot up, and the hips are basically going close to the position to which they were meant to be starting at. Again, he's going a little bit fast, and he's not really taking the tension out of the bar, which is going to exaggerate the hip shoot up. But the general go-to error that you can see is that there is going to be hip shoot up when the hips are starting too low. So if you, 1, identify that there is hip shoot up in the deadlift, that is a very good sign that the hips are too low, coupled with, take a video from the side. Again, if that thigh is looking close to horizontal to the floor, or you don't have that nice V angle between the thigh and the torso, well, that is probably all signs that the hips are starting too low. Now, when the hips are starting too high, you will see that it kind of looks like a stiff-legged deadlift. All right. When someone lifts, you can already see that this torso is close to parallel to the floor. The hips are a little bit too high here. So when Brad lifts this off the floor, it looks like he's kind of pulling with his back. Okay, so it looks like more of a stiff-legged deadlift. So if I let this play out, you might be able to notice on how high the hips look. You can see that chest is falling forward. The angle in the knee here looks a little bit too open. All right. And this is a good example. And also, if we look at the bar in a sec when I get him. Remember, if we're looking at the side of the bar, if the shoulder blades are way ahead of the bar, that is a sign that the hips are starting too high. Another example that I will give is my sister. So when she lifts this off the floor, you can already see, look at this angle of the thigh. It's a bit too vertical relative to this part of the movement. This angle of the thigh should be occurring much later in the deadlift. She's even having a hard time getting a nice arch in her back because it looks like she's pulling with her back. So if we let it play out, you can see how it looks like she's pulling with her back. So that is an example of the hips are too high. And again, you see that position again. This is not directly from the side, so it doesn't look as bad as Brad's. But if this video was taken directly from the side again, you're going to see those shoulder blades are too far ahead from the edge of the barbell. Again, body is too far over, so the hips are too high. And then another subtle one that can happen sometimes, it doesn't happen all the time, but Christian does a good example. If the hips are too, again, we can see that Christian's shoulder blades is way in front of the bar. But Christian's one is a little bit different because what you'll see is that when he lifts, look how his body, see how his body shifts back and his hips almost drop, and it looks like he's scooping the weight up. All right. Another thing that you can see how the weight's getting scooped up. You can see how this bar is no longer coming up in a straight line. If you're looking at the edge of the barbell, it's kind of got like a bit of a curved path. All right, his shins are probably hitting the bar, but you can see how his hips are dropping. Okay, because again, the hips are probably trying to move into a position that he was meant to start with. So he's getting a bit of actually hip drop before he comes up because the hips are starting too high. And in this last video, this is going to be a good hip starting position. You can see when Ben is in this position here, he has that V shape between the torso and the thigh. The edge of the barbell is in line with his shoulder blades. And like I was pointing out at the start of the video, his hips and knees open all at the same time. So if we play this, you will see this is pretty much perfect hip starting position. Again, hips and knees opening at the same time. Bar is in line with the shoulder blades, and he has that good V shape starting position off the floor.